I think there's the layers of like, not only do you believe in yourself enough to try, but you also have the belief in yourself that if you don't figure it out the first time, you'll figure it out the second. And even if you don't figure it out the second, you'll just dedicate the rest of your life to figuring it out.
Is inaccurate thinking ever empowering? That's the question I've been contemplating with Emilia.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. Are you all right, sir?
About to go run and get it.
You can go get your ring in a couple seconds. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode. It was number 1217. When is the right time to give up on someone? It could be something, someone, whatever you want. Today, for episode number 1218, the number one story you're telling yourself. So, as I've mentioned, I am going to Florida in 2 weeks, which I'm super excited for. And I will be speaking on a panel at a podcast event, which is my very first, I guess, I don't want to say speaking opportunity for podcasting, but that level, like at a podcast event that many people will be at. And I think I had this realization, Alan, throughout the week where I had several people say, hey, are you going to PodFest? And I was like, yeah, I'll be there. And I think I'm speaking on the panel. And it's like, how many people are going to be there? It's going to be like a big event. We're talking like hundreds of people. We're talking thousands of people. You know, how many? I don't know if I'm prepared for this. So I had a moment where this episode kind of jumped up for me where I think we have a belief and we have a story that we're telling ourselves. And either we assume it's the last time we're going to tell ourselves that story, or it's the last time we're going to tell ourselves a story, or it's the last time we're going to have that belief. And then we forget to recheck in with, okay, well, when you get through that story, when you make it to the end of that story, when you complete that story, then what? What's the next story that you're telling yourself? And I'm still kind of running that paradigm of the not good enoughness, where, again, this podcast, going on other podcasts, coaching calls, all that, I feel great. But now I'm going to be in a room of other podcasters where that's a little bit intimidating. That's a little bit scary. So the story that I've been telling myself is I'm not good enough necessarily. And I have enough reps with this is how I break that down. This is what I do with that. But there's just a lot of circumstances. I'm traveling without you, which I haven't done. I mean, I have, but I've never traveled to an event without you. This is the first time I'll be doing that. I've never spoken on a panel. I've never spoken on a stage without you.
You've done a hot seat.
Yeah, that's fair. But
Virtual.
not without you.
Yeah, that's
not
true.
Without you. So there's
and then
just
you've also done the Q&A on stage as well, but also I was there too.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of circumstances that I think affect that story. But the ultimate goal in this episode is for you to say to yourself, what is the current story I'm telling myself? Because just because it's not the same as it used to be, it doesn't mean there's not a story there. And it doesn't mean it's not potentially holding you back. And it also doesn't necessarily mean when you get through this story, there's not another story waiting for you.
I think we should define what a story is. Because I want to go back to the very, very beginning here. And I want actually your perspective on this too. A story that you're telling yourself is a belief that may or may not be true, right? Yeah.
I would say, the story is your understanding of what's happening around you.
Right.
Probably the best way to put it for me.
Okay, so what's a good example of this? Emilia taught me this. She says validate, dissipate. Whenever you have a fear, she says talk about the fear and then validate the fear or dissipate the fear. In other words, hiking in the woods at night, it's dark. If you're afraid that you're going to run into a black bear, let's say, okay, I'm afraid I'm going to run into a black bear. The story I'm telling myself is that I'm going to get eaten by a black bear. Is that accurate based on the statistics? And if you were to look up how many people get eaten by black bears, it's very, very, very slim chances. But our fear is telling ourselves that story. And I think that from an evolutionary standpoint, the reason for that is because the person scared ran home and survived. And the person who didn't have that story at all ended up dying sometimes, right? So whenever you have a fear, and that's really what this is, Kev, more than anything, is there's a lot of new, Podfest, how many people are going to be there? You're going to be on a panel. You're not going to have me there. It's the first time really speaking in person on podcasting for the most part. So your story to yourself is, am I good enough? Am I going to crush it? Am I not going to do well? All that kind of stuff. I think it's just fears, like a bunch of fears are coming up.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't succeed is because they think that when they're more successful, they'll finally feel good enough and they'll finally feel less afraid. When in reality, in some ways, it exacerbates the fears because, someone's like, hey, you going to Podfest? It's like, yeah, I'm actually potentially speaking there. That's really cool. That is cool. That's awesome. Like, that's a really cool story. You know what's not so cool? The plane ride there freaking out inside. And you don't get one without the other. And I think that people don't fully understand that. You kind of have to, I think that every external success, as long as it wasn't fabricated or fake in terms of social media or marketing or editing or whatever, I think that every real success that's based on true work and true merit, I think it was the only reason that success was possible was because of like struggle and sacrifice and difficulty behind the scenes that no one ever saw. So Kevin and I just had a really big payday yesterday. We redid a website at Next Level Web Solutions for one of our clients, and it was $3,000 for the whole website. But I mean, it's not like we just had $3,000 wired into our bank account. What we did really is, how long did that take? Like 3 months, 4 months?
2 or 3.
2 or 3. So shout out to Alessandro for doing all that work, but there's work behind the scenes. Every success externally, whether it's going to Podfest or it's that $3,000, coming into our bank account or whatever, it always was a bunch of hard work and challenges and strife and struggle behind the scenes that no one ever saw. Stephen Kotler talks about this on the interview we did with him a long time ago. He wrote the book, The Art of Impossible. And he said, I've never written a book. I've written 12 books, 2 of which are still sitting in a drawer, 10 of which are published. And I've never written a single book where I wasn't on the floor at one point crying. And I think that's a really good analogy for life. And to get back to the story you're telling yourself about yourself, you're going to have to face these stories. I was joking with Kev behind the scenes earlier. I had a weird hair thing going on. And I said something along the lines of, this is why people avoid me, is because then they'd have to face the story that their hair is great because mine is sweet right now or whatever. I was just joking. But one of the things that I think is really difficult for all of us is we have these identities that are built on stories, and they're not necessarily accurate. Most people that I coach, I just surpassed my 3,700th coaching call, so 3,700 hours, and I usually go over, so it's probably more than that between the team and clients. I'm really, all I'm doing in coaching mostly is just undistorting reality. I'm basically trying to figure out where they're thinking inaccurately about themselves, about other people, and about the world. And I'm trying to find the stories they're telling themselves about themselves or about the world, and I'm trying to help them think more accurately. Most people are more capable than they've told themselves. Some people are way less capable than they've told themselves, and that's delusional self-worth and some other stuff. But this story thing is a thing because the story you tell yourself is often quite inaccurate. And then you make decisions off that. Like if Kevin believed the story he told himself that he's not good enough, he would never go to Podfest. And your whole life would change trajectory. So this is like a big deal.
And I just wanted to share a little bit about my experience of Next Level Live in 2022. I've been to a lot of live events before, and there's nothing quite like this group of people in this community that these guys have cultivated. The intimate feeling that you get in the group. Yes, there's a lot of people, but there's not so many people that it's overwhelming. I actually attended this event completely by myself last year, but I also felt right at home when I got into the room. If you've been following these guys on the podcast and you do their monthly meetups and things like that, I have to say there is nothing quite like actually getting in the room and being surrounded by the energy that these guys bring to the table. So if you are on the fence about attending Next Level Live 2023, I highly encourage you to do so. You are going to get so much out of the experience, and you are going to be so grateful that you did.
Well, that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it's like, again, if I'm dealing with it, I'm not the only person in the world dealing with it. I don't know if many people want to talk about it, especially at this stage, but for me, it's important to talk about it, because I think that's the interesting thing is I might say the odds of me running into somebody I know are actually pretty high, all things considered, which is weird for me. But if somebody sees me there, right?
Are you Kevin Palmieri?
I don't see people. So when I see people, it's weird. For me, I want people to understand the inner dialogue as much as what they see. And this is one of the reasons why. We used to do a lot of debriefs after, whether it was a live podcast or whether it was a speech or whatever. And I would get feedback from Alan or the team, and everybody would be like, wow, you did really good. And thank you. I appreciate that very much. The problem with that feedback is that you don't understand my internal dialogue during. So you might think externally I did a really good job, but internally the story I'm telling myself is I don't know what I'm going to say next. So that's my experience. My experience is the internal thing that's going on, not necessarily the result. Like, cool, the speech went well, but in my mind, I wasn't doing a very good job. I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel together. I didn't know what I was going to say. I felt just a mess. So I think that's an interesting thing is there's the internal story we're telling ourselves, and then there's like the external book that gets written. And that's kind of that balance where I bet you if you came and you saw me at Podfest, you'd have no idea how I was feeling. But that's why it's important for me to tell you how I'm feeling, because you'd never know. You'd assume,
you'd presuppose that you're super confident, that you don't struggle, and then you'd presuppose that you could never do that.
Right.
Because of your fears or whatever.
And why wouldn't you? I mean, it makes sense. It makes total sense that you assume that somebody that is where you want to be has what you don't. And maybe there are things I quote unquote have that you don't. I mean, I have a lot of reps.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Because I don't feel that way. Sometimes I do. In bodybuilding, definitely. Oh my God. I mean, definitely. It's like, there's no way I could ever look like that. But for the most part, I don't ever assume anyone has something that I don't. What is that about?
Belief. That's just belief. I think it's belief.
So the story I've told myself is that I have the tools necessary to achieve most things. Right.
Yeah.
Which again is just a story. I could be wrong.
True. Yeah. And if you don't have the tools, you'll find them.
Right.
I think there's the layers of like, not only do you believe in yourself enough to try, but you also have the belief in yourself that if you don't figure it out the first time, you'll figure it out the second. And even if you don't figure it out the second, you'll just dedicate the rest of your life to figuring it out. And that's just your story.
Insert Next Level University, 1,218 times.
Right. It's like, we're almost there. We almost kind of figured this out. Where somebody else, I was on a podcast last night, and he said, what stops people? Like, why do people not achieve their goals? And I said, it's either fear of failure or fear of success. And he's like, well, there's got to be more. And I was like, yeah, there's more contextually and there's more specifically, but I'm pretty sure you can put it into those two buckets. Really. I mean, yeah, there's lack of strategy and all that, but it's very hard for people. If you don't believe in yourself, the story you're telling yourself is, I could never accomplish A because of whatever, this, and this. So you're not going to try. And then when you don't try, you don't get any feedback. So it's almost like if you don't believe enough in layer one, you're almost never going to get to layer two.
Yeah.
And if you do get to layer two, it's probably not going to go super well. So the odds of you getting to layer three are just minuscule. And it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, where for you, it's just completely different. It's almost like, I believe I can, I believe I can make a podcast. All right, cool. I'm going to go try it. I remember one of your first episodes, you recorded outside and the audio was horrible and there was helicopters and whatnot, but you were going to do another one. I was like, oh, whatever. This one kind of sucked, but now I know what to do next time. All right, cool. Boom. Back to the drawing board. So eventually you would have gotten here no matter what, because that's just who you are. You're that type of person. And even that's a story. You're the type of person who would show up and figure it out. And if you messed up, you'd go back to the drawing board and try not to mess up the same thing next time. Right? That's a story too.
Do you think that's a useful identity for people to adopt?
Not if they don't have... I mean, yes, but I would say you can't. It's very hard to adopt that identity until you adopt the belief first. Because the downside of the way you think, I don't. That sounded so hardcore.
It's okay,
The
man.
way
I'm
you
not-
think sucks.
Yeah. No. Hey, there's a huge downside.
I know.
Definitely.
The
There's massive
downside,
pain and hurting, a bleeding heart.
right? Exactly.
For sure.
And I don't think most people, the level of belief you have has to be correlated with the level of disappointment you can handle, in a way. So I think it would be a good mindset to adopt. It would be a good story to adopt, but not to the level that you have it.
No, I would say not overnight. I think you could build it slowly over time, because the more belief you have, in a way, the more disappointment you're going to experience. Because the more you believe in yourself, the more you believe in yourself, the more stuff you're going to try, and the more failure you're inevitably going to face. So my ability to handle disappointment is just very high because I've done it my whole life. Like, very rarely do things go better than I thought they would. You know what I mean? I'm just very optimistic. Including the amount of time in this episode. So
I don't want to live that way. I don't want to live that way. I like the other way.
It's really challenging.
Yeah,
really,
I like
really
the other way.
Yeah.
I do. It's like
let's find 5. That's all I'm saying.
experience. I'm sure you've heard the quote. And I don't know if this is the actual quote, but this is the thought behind it. The problem with anxiety is you live your fear twice. So you're anxious about the flight, and then you're afraid on the flight. You're anxious about the speech, and then you're afraid on the stage. And like, that's how I knew. You said one time, you're like, I don't think I have anxiety. I was like, Alan, you do not have anxiety, brother. You do not have anxiety, because it's almost like you don't worry enough about the stuff that you should worry about.
Definitely.
But that's just the way you're wired.
Yeah.
I over worry about the stuff that I maybe shouldn't worry about.
This is a little too philosophical, so we won't go down this rabbit hole. Maybe we do an episode another time. But the thing is I am worried about things that are. So that's the thing. I have anxiety about 2035 and whether or not we're going to hit our mark, genuinely. So what if I just can't worry about the flight because I don't have the capacity, because I'm so worried about 5,
That's
10,
fair.
15 years, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
I think you can build this, but I think if you have a story that you tell this is my new conclusion, and I've been contemplating this with Emilia a lot, and then we'll go. Is inaccurate thinking ever empowering? That's the question I've been contemplating with Emilia. I think trying to make the story you tell yourself as accurate as possible, in other words, science, like hypothesis, test the theory, see the evidence, and then figure out and what's true. I think accurate thinking is the most empowering thing in the world, aka truth. Right? So we joke about the Canada. We went to Canada a couple months ago, and we joke about how he guessed 90 million people in Canada. I guessed 120 million. It was actually 34 million, I believe. And how if you moved to Canada thinking that the economy was going to be the best in the world, you'd make a decision based on inaccurate data, and you'd be disappointed when you got there, because they don't have the biggest economy in the world, and they're not the worst by any means. But the point is that I think inaccurate thinking about self, about others, and about the world is almost always one of the root causes of poor decisions, and poor decisions are the root cause of, I think, being unfulfilled. Because if you're inaccurate about self, you make decisions based on that, then you're not fulfilled, because it's like me with spicy food. I keep trying and I hate it every time. It's like, why don't you just figure this out? Like, you just don't like spicy food, Alan. It's like, oh, well, I think I could evolve. No, just stop, right?
Some things aren't worth evolving for.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we're going to talk about that a lot, actually, in the next episode. The next episode we're going to do is the most important thing for you to learn about is yourself. So it's very connected to this one in a way, but I want to dive deep into that too. And again, it'll be a quick episode because I have another podcast, but we got to pop. Next level nation. Sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your.
No, you're good.
In your flow. I got to keep us on schedule here.
Got to.
As you know, we are going to be talking about this for the next 3 months, 2.5 months. April 1st, 2023, Next Level Live. You and 49 other people in a room in Worcester, Massachusetts. When I say a room, I mean a very, very fancy hotel, not just a room. Alan and I will be there. The team, many members of the team will be there. But I want you to think of it as an experience. It's not a speech. It's not a presentation. It is an event. It is an experience. It is an opportunity for you to meet people, to learn about yourself, and to leave with something that you didn't come with. Whatever, maybe it's a new perspective, a new tactic, a deeper understanding. That is what we are playing for.
At very least, please check out the landing page and watch the video. It's like a minute long, maybe a minute and a half. And it was just a hell of an experience. It was an awesome day, genuinely life-changing, and that video does it justice. So at least watch that video. That's all I'm saying. If you like this podcast, this is the song. That is the concert. Also, book club. We are at our 95 95th book club in a row. Can't talk today. 95th book club in a row today. I actually have prepped for book club earlier today. Super pumped about that. It's a small community of people who love great books. Next level books with next level people. It's a safe place to contemplate these things. No one wants to read books alone, especially not boring ones. These are really useful books, and we have some really passionate discussions in there that are honestly life-changing. I've definitely benefited from the discussions that happen in there, because when you contemplate one thing from 360 degrees, you understand it holistically and you just have different perspectives. So it's really quite amazing. The link will be in the show notes to register.
Next Level Nation tomorrow for episode number 1219. As I just mentioned, the most important thing for you to learn about is yourself. Hashtag hyperconsciousness. That's where all of this started. As always, we love you, appreciate you, grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans, we have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
And we'll see you at the next level.